Hey there, you looking kinda cute. Don't forget to subscribe and check out my other socials for more. Enjoy. Walter Matthews strode purposefully through the accounting firm's office. His polished Oxfords clicked against the tile floor, each step exuding an air of unwavering professionalism. Impeccably dressed in a crisp charcoal suit, his Windsor knotted tie perfectly centered, Walter embodied the very essence of masculine corporate culture. Colleagues instinctively straightened their posture as he passed, his stern demeanor commanding respect without a single word uttered. Walter's reputation preceded him, a no-nonsense taskmaster with an eagle eye for detail and an iron grip on the company's finances. Reaching his corner office, Walter settled into the plush leather chair behind his imposing mahogany desk. Family photos lined the shelves, snapshots of hunting trips with his brothers, a prized marlin caught on a deep-sea fishing expedition. Each carefully curated image reinforced the rugged, masculine persona he had meticulously crafted over the years. Opening his laptop, Walter immersed himself in a sea of spreadsheets and financial reports. Numbers had always been his sanctuary, their orderly rows and columns providing a comforting structure to his world. Here, in this realm of cold, hard data, there was no room for messy emotions or complicated introspection. As the day wore on, Walter found his thoughts drifting to the upcoming weekend. His niece's birthday party loomed on the horizon, an event he approached with a mix of obligation and mild dread. Children's gatherings were far outside his comfort zone, filled with chaos and frivolity that clashed with his regimented nature. Glancing at his watch, Walter realized it was time to brave the mall in search of an appropriate gift. He meticulously packed away his work, each item returned to its designated place with practiced precision. Shrugging on his suit jacket, he gave his reflection a final critical once-over in the office window. Satisfied with his impeccable appearance, Walter headed out to face the daunting task ahead. The cacophony of the crowded shopping center assaulted Walter's senses as he stepped through the automatic doors. Throngs of teenagers loitered by the food court, their raucous laughter grating on his nerves. Young families corralled unruly children, the chaos of it all making Walter's jaw clench involuntarily. Steeling himself, he forged ahead, his mind focused solely on the mission at hand. What did 8-year-old girls even like these days? Dolls seemed a safe bet, though the thought of navigating a toy store filled him with trepidation. Perhaps a gift card would suffice, impersonal, yet practical. Yes, that would do nicely. Lost in thought, Walter found himself wandering past the mall's central atrium. A glint of sequins caught his eye, drawing his gaze to a nearby storefront. There, displayed in the window, was a dress that took his breath away. Layers of gauzy tulle cascaded down from a fitted bodice, creating an ethereal silhouette. Delicate beadwork caught the light, transforming the garment into a shimmering masterpiece. It was the color of a summer sky, a blue so pure it made Walter's heart ache with a longing he couldn't quite name. Transfixed, he stepped closer to the window, drinking in every exquisite detail. Memories long buried began to surface, flashes of childhood curiosity, secret moments of yearning quickly stifled by shame and fear. Walter's hands trembled slightly as he pressed them against the cool glass, overwhelmed by the rush of emotions threatening to break through his carefully constructed walls. A group of chattering shoppers jolted Walter back to reality. He stumbled backward, cheeks flushing as he realized how long he'd been staring. Straightening his tie, he cast a furtive glance around, terrified someone might have noticed his momentary lapse. Determined to banish the unsettling feelings, Walter strode purposefully toward the nearest department store. He would purchase a sensible gift for his niece and put this bizarre incident behind him. Yet with each step, the image of that captivating dress lingered in his mind, refusing to be dismissed. Inside the bustling store, Walter made a beeline for the children's section. Row upon row of pink and frilly items assaulted his senses, a stark contrast to the muted grays and navy blues that dominated his own wardrobe. He grabbed the first acceptable item he saw, a plush unicorn with rainbow-hued mane, and headed for the checkout, eager to conclude this unsettling excursion. As the bored cashier rang up his purchase, Walter's gaze drifted back toward the mall's main corridor. The dress shop's sign glowed like a beacon, drawing him in despite his best efforts to resist. Before he could second-guess himself, Walter blurted out, "Actually, I forgot something. I'll be right back." Heart pounding, he retraced his steps to the mesmerizing window display. Up close, the dress was even more breathtaking than he'd first realized. Walter's fingers twitched with the urge to reach out and touch the delicate fabric, to feel its softness against his skin. "Can I help you find something?" The saleswoman's cheerful voice made Walter jump. He spun around, fumbling for an excuse. My niece's birthday. Just browsing." She smiled warmly, gesturing toward the dress. "It's lovely, isn't it? We just got this collection in. Would you like to take a closer look?" Every instinct screamed at Walter to flee, to retreat to the safety of his structured masculine world. Yet something stronger, a force he couldn't explain, compelled him forward. He nodded mutely, following the saleswoman into the shop. Surrounded by racks of flowing fabrics and shimmering sequins, Walter felt dizzy with conflicting emotions. Part of him longed to lose himself in this kaleidoscope of color and texture, while another voice whispered harsh admonishments, urging him to remember who he was supposed to be. The saleswoman held up the dress, its airy layers swaying gently. "What do you think? It's one of our most popular styles for special occasions." Walter's throat constricted, making speech impossible. His fingers reached out of their own accord, brushing against the gossamer soft material. A jolt of electricity seemed to course through him at the contact, awakening long-dormant desires. "I'll take it," he heard himself say, the words tumbling out before he could stop them. The saleswoman beamed, wholly unaware of the internal struggle raging within her customer. "Wonderful! I'm sure your niece will adore it. Shall I wrap it up for you?" Shame and exhilaration warred within Walter as he numbly nodded his assent. He fumbled with his wallet, hand shaking as he extracted his credit card. The transaction complete, Walter clutched the glossy shopping bag to his chest like a lifeline. Mumbling his thanks, he practically fled the store, desperate to escape the knowing smiles of the staff. The weight of his secret purchase seemed to burn through the bag, branding him with his transgression. Walter's mind raced as he navigated the crowded mall, barely registering his surroundings. What had he done? How could he, a paragon of masculine professionalism, have been so weak? He should march right back and return the dress, bury this momentary lapse in judgment, and never speak of it again. Yet even as these thoughts swirled through his head, Walter's grip on the bag never loosened. Deep down, a part of him he'd long denied rejoiced at this small act of rebellion. For the first time in years, he felt truly alive, awash in possibilities he'd never dared to contemplate. The drive home passed in a blur, Walter's usually laser-focused mind consumed by a whirlwind of conflicting emotions. He barely remembered parking his car or riding the elevator to his apartment. It wasn't until he stood in the center of his living room, still clutching the shopping bag, that reality began to sink in. Walter's apartment was a testament to his carefully curated image: sleek leather furniture, dark wood accents, and not a single item out of place. The bag in his hands felt like an intruder, a splash of vibrant color disrupting his meticulously monochromatic world. With trembling fingers, he extracted the dress from its wrappings. The delicate fabric unfurled, casting dancing reflections across the room as sequins caught the fading afternoon light. Walter's breath caught in his throat as he held it up, marveling at its beauty. A lifetime of conditioning warred with the undeniable pull he felt toward the garment. Memories long repressed bubbled to the surface, furtive glances at his mother's makeup bag, the secret thrill of trying on a pair of Mary Janes when no one was looking. He'd buried those desires so deep, convinced himself they were shameful aberrations to be overcome. Yet here, in the privacy of his own home, those old longings refused to be silenced. Walter's fingers caressed the soft material, tracing the intricate beadwork with reverence. Without conscious thought, he found himself holding the dress up to his body, imagining how it might feel to wear it. The image in the mirror stopped him cold. There stood Walter Matthews, paragon of masculinity, clutching a frilly dress to his chest with an expression of naked longing. The cognitive dissonance was staggering. Cheeks burning with shame, Walter hastily shoved the dress back into its bag and buried it in the depths of his closet. He stripped off his suit with jerky movements, desperate to wash away the memory of his moment of weakness. A scalding shower did little to quiet the tumult in his mind. As he lay sleepless that night, Walter's thoughts continually drifted to the hidden treasure lurking behind his row of identical charcoal suits. Try as he might, he couldn't banish the image of that shimmering blue fabric from his mind. Something fundamental had shifted within him, and he feared there was no going back. The next few days passed in a haze of distraction for Walter. At work, he found himself making careless errors, his usual laser focus disrupted by intrusive thoughts of sequins and tulle. Colleagues remarked on his uncharacteristic absent-mindedness, but Walter brushed off their concerns with terse reassurances. Each night, he returned home to find himself drawn inexorably to his closet. The shopping bag sat nestled between his meticulously pressed shirts, a siren call he struggled to resist. Walter would stand there for long minutes, hand hovering over the closet door, warring with himself. It was on the fourth night that his resolve finally crumbled. Heart-pounding, Walter retrieved the bag with trembling hands. He laid the dress out on his bed, smoothing the delicate fabric with reverent touches. "This is madness," he muttered, even as his fingers worked at his tie. Piece by piece, Walter shed the armor of his masculine persona. The starched shirt, the pressed slacks, each garment discarded felt like shedding a layer of expectations that had suffocated him for so long. Standing there in nothing but his underwear, Walter felt more vulnerable and alive than he had in years. With shaking hands, he lifted the dress. The cool fabric whispered against his skin as he slipped it over his head. Walter fumbled with the zipper, cursing his clumsy fingers. When at last it was secured, he stood frozen, afraid to look at his reflection. Taking a deep breath, Walter forced himself to face the full-length mirror. The sight that greeted him stole the air from his lungs. The dress hugged his body in ways he'd never imagined, softening his angular frame and highlighting curves he didn't know he possessed. Tears pricked at Walter's eyes as he twirled slowly, watching the skirt billow around him. For the first time in his adult life, he felt beautiful. The rigid mask he'd worn for so long cracked and fell away, revealing a part of himself he'd long denied. "Oh my God," he whispered, voice thick with emotion. Is this who I really am?" The question hung in the air, unanswered but filled with possibility. Walter sank onto the edge of his bed, overwhelmed by the rush of conflicting feelings. Joy and terror warred within him as he contemplated the implications of this moment. For hours, Walter sat there, lost in thought as he absently stroked the soft fabric of the skirt. He thought back on a lifetime of repression, of forcing himself into a mold that never quite fit. How many times had he sneered at anything remotely feminine, overcompensating for the secret desires he couldn't acknowledge even to himself? As dawn's early light began to filter through the curtains, Walter rose on unsteady legs. He carefully removed the dress, folding it with a tenderness that surprised him. This time, instead of burying it in the back of his closet, he placed it reverently in his dresser's top drawer. Exhausted but oddly energized, Walter prepared for another day at the office. As he knotted his tie with practiced motions, he caught his reflection in the mirror. For the first time, he saw past the stern facade to the truth hidden beneath. A small smile tugged at the corners of his mouth. a crack in the armor he'd worn for so long. The next few weeks passed in a whirlwind of self-discovery for Walter. By day, he maintained his carefully cultivated image of masculine professionalism. But each night, safe within the confines of his apartment, he allowed himself to explore this newfound aspect of his identity. At first, it was just the dress. Walter would don it reverently, marveling at the way it transformed not just his appearance, but his entire demeanor. He found himself standing taller, moving with a grace he'd never known he possessed. Emboldened by these private moments, Walter began to expand his horizons. A furtive trip to the mall yielded a small makeup palette, hidden away in his briefcase like contraband. YouTube tutorials became his nightly companion as he fumbled through the basics of contouring and eyeshadow application. Each small step was a revelation. Walter discovered a joy in self-expression he'd never known existed. The rigid boxes he'd confined himself to for so long began to crumble, revealing a spectrum of possibilities he was only beginning to explore. Of course, this journey was not without its challenges. Walter grappled with intense waves of shame and self-doubt. Years of internalized prejudice didn't disappear overnight. There were moments when he would look at himself in the mirror, fully made up and dressed in flowing fabrics, and be overwhelmed by a crushing sense of wrongness. In these dark moments, Walter would retreat to the familiar comfort of his suits and spreadsheets. He'd throw himself into work with renewed vigor, as if he could somehow erase the memory of soft skin and painted nails through sheer force of will. But always, the siren call of self-discovery would lure him back. With each return to exploration, Walter found it a little easier to silence the voices of judgment, both external and internal. Slowly but surely, he was coming to terms with the complex, multifaceted person he truly was. One particularly significant evening, as Walter carefully applied a shimmering eyeshadow, a realization struck him. The face staring back from the mirror was undeniably his own, yet so different from the stern visage he presented to the world. Softer, more open, with a light in the eyes he hadn't seen in years. "Hello," he whispered, voice catching with emotion. "It's nice to finally meet you." In that moment, something shifted within Walter. The shame that had dogged his every step began to recede, replaced by a growing sense of self-acceptance. He wasn't betraying who he was by exploring this side of himself. He was finally allowing his true self to emerge. This newfound confidence began to bleed into other aspects of Walter's life. Colleagues remarked on his improved mood, the way he seemed more approachable and engaged. While he still maintained his professional demeanor, there was an undeniable lightness to his step that hadn't been there before. At home, Walter's explorations grew bolder. He began experimenting with different styles of clothing, from flowing bohemian skirts to sleek, form-fitting dresses. Each new outfit was a chance to express a different facet of his personality, to play with the fluidity of gender in ways he'd never allowed himself before. One weekend, feeling particularly daring, Walter decided to take his feminine persona out into the world. Heart pounding, he carefully applied his makeup and donned a casual sundress. With trembling hands, Walter smoothed down the sundress and took a deep breath. The woman in the mirror looked back at him, familiar yet transformed. As he gazed at his reflection, a name bubbled up from some hidden part of his psyche. "Haley," he whispered, testing the sound of it. "I'm Haley." The name felt right, like slipping on a perfectly fitted glove. Haley. It was soft and feminine, yet with a strength that resonated deep within him. Walter, now Haley, smiled at her reflection, a tentative but genuine expression of joy. "Nice to meet you, Haley," she murmured, feeling a thrill at addressing herself by her chosen name. Taking one last look in the mirror, Haley gathered her courage and stepped out of her apartment. The hallway felt different somehow, as if the very air recognized her transformation. She made her way to the elevator, heart pounding with each step. As the doors slid open, Haley came face to face with her neighbor, Mrs. Donovan. The elderly woman did a double take, clearly not recognizing the person before her. "Oh, hello, dear," Mrs. Donovan said, a hint of confusion in her voice. "Are you visiting someone?" Haley froze for a moment, caught off guard. But then a calm settled over her, and she found herself smiling warmly. "No, actually. I live here. I'm Walter's cousin, Haley, just in town for a visit." Mrs. Donovan's face lit up with understanding. "Oh, how lovely. Walter's such a nice young man. It's wonderful he has family visiting. Enjoy your stay, dear." As the elevator descended, Haley felt a mix of exhilaration and relief. Her first interaction as her true self had gone smoothly. The world hadn't ended. No one had pointed and laughed. It was normal. Stepping out onto the street, Haley took a deep breath of the crisp morning air. The city looked different through her eyes, brighter, full of possibilities. She set off down the sidewalk, reveling in the swish of her skirt against her legs and the click of her modest heels on the pavement. Her first destination was a nearby cafe she'd always wanted to try, but had never worked up the courage to enter. It had always seemed too quaint, too inviting for the stern businessman Walter had pretended to be. But for Haley, it was perfect. The cheerful tinkle of the bell announced her arrival. Haley approached the counter, studying the menu board intently. "What can I get for you?" the barista asked with a friendly smile. Haley opened her mouth to order her usual black coffee, then paused. Why stick to old habits? "I'll have a caramel macchiato, please, and one of those lemon scones." As she waited for her order, Haley glanced around the cafe. It was busy but not crowded, filled with the gentle murmur of conversation and the rich aroma of coffee. She caught sight of her reflection in a decorative mirror and felt a surge of confidence. She belonged here just as much as anyone else. Settling into a cozy window seat with her treats, Haley pulled out a book she'd been meaning to read for ages.
It was a far cry from the dry business tomes that usually filled her briefcase. This was pure escapism, a romance novel with a cover she would have been mortified to be seen with just weeks ago. As she sipped her sweet coffee and lost herself in the story, Haley felt a sense of peace settle over her. This was right. This was who she was meant to be. The rest of the day passed in a blur of small, joyful discoveries. Haley window shopped, admiring clothes she could now imagine herself wearing. She browsed a bookstore, lingering in sections Walter would have hurried past. Each interaction, each moment spent existing as her true self, felt like a victory. As the sun began to set, Haley made her way home. She felt a twinge of sadness at the thought of shedding her feminine attire, of becoming Walter again. But she comforted herself with the knowledge that this was just the beginning. Haley wasn't going anywhere. Over the next few weeks, Haley's forays into the world grew bolder and more frequent. She began to establish a routine, setting aside specific days where she could fully embrace her feminine identity. These Haley days became a lifeline, something to look forward to during the long work weeks spent as Walter. One sunny Saturday, Haley decided to visit a local park. She'd packed a light picnic and brought along a sketch pad, another hobby she was rediscovering after years of neglect. As she settled onto a bench near a picturesque pond, Haley felt a sense of contentment wash over her. She was so engrossed in her drawing that she didn't notice someone approaching until a shadow fell across her paper. "Oh, wow, that's really good." Haley looked up, startled, to find a young woman smiling down at her. The stranger had a shock of vibrant blue hair and an easygoing demeanor that immediately put Haley at ease. "Thanks," Haley replied, feeling a blush creep across her cheeks. "I'm a bit rusty, but I'm trying to get back into it." The woman's smile widened. "Well, you could have fooled me. I'm Cora, by the way. Mind if I join you? This looks like the perfect spot to people watch." Haley found herself nodding, both thrilled and nervous at the prospect of company. "Please, have a seat. I'm Haley." Cora plopped down beside her with an easy grace. "Nice to meet you, Haley. So, are you an artist?" The question gave Haley pause. Was she an artist?
Walter certainly wasn't, but Haley could be anything she wanted to be. "I'd like to be," she answered honestly. "I used to draw a lot when I was younger, but life got in the way. I'm trying to reconnect with that part of myself." Cora nodded sagely. "I get that. It's so easy to lose touch with the things that bring us joy. Good for you for getting back to it." As they continued to chat, Haley found herself relaxing more and more in Cora's presence. There was something about the other woman's open, accepting nature that put her at ease. For the first time, Haley felt like she was forming a genuine connection with someone as her true self. The afternoon flew by in a whirl of conversation and laughter. Haley shared her picnic with Cora, and they swapped stories about their lives. Haley was careful to keep certain details vague, but she found she could be more honest about her feelings and experiences than she ever had been as Walter. As the sun began to dip low on the horizon, Cora glanced at her watch with a rueful expression. "Oh man, I didn't realize how late it was getting. I should probably head out soon." Haley felt a pang of disappointment. She wasn't ready for this magical afternoon to end. Gathering her courage, she blurted out, "Would you like to grab dinner? There's a great little Italian place not far from here." Cora's face lit up. "That sounds amazing. I'm always down for pasta." They packed up Haley's picnic supplies and set off towards the restaurant, falling into easy conversation once more. As they walked, Haley marveled at how natural it felt to be out in the world like this. The constant anxiety that had plagued Walter for so long was nowhere to be found. The restaurant was cozy and intimate, with checkered tablecloths and candles flickering in wine bottles. As they perused the menu, Haley felt a flutter of nerves. Was this a date? Did she want it to be? The newness of the situation was both exciting and terrifying. Cora seemed oblivious to Haley's internal turmoil, chatting animatedly about her favorite dishes. "Oh, you have to try the gnocchi here. It's like little pillows of heaven." Their waiter arrived to take their order, and Haley found herself deferring to Cora's expertise. As they waited for their food, the conversation flowed as easily as the wine. Haley learned that Cora worked as a graphic designer and volunteered at an animal shelter in her spare time. In turn, she shared carefully edited stories about her own life, focusing on her rediscovered passion for art and her love of literature. There was something about the way Cora looked at her, really saw her, that made Haley feel truly beautiful for the first time in her life. Thanks for watching. The rest won't be viewable on YouTube, so check out Patreon if you want more.